Everyone in the room laughed when the CEO pointed at the janitor's shy teenage daughter and said, "If you can fix this engine, I will give you a scholarship." They expected her to panic. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and walked forward. What happened next left every engineer speechless, but hidden beneath the grease and wires was a buried family secret, one that would shake the entire company and expose a truth no one was ready for. She was not ordinary. She was unstoppable. Before we start like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. The engine room buzzed with tension inside. The corporate headquarters of Stratton Dynamics, a powerful automotive tech giant in Detroit. The atmosphere felt more like a press event than a board meeting. The air smelled of oil, ambition, and arrogance. Engineers in sleek suits whispered, trying not to laugh. At the center of it all stood a 12-cylinder prototype engine that had baffled the entire research division. Was their next big thing. Multi-million-dollar innovation meant to change the industry. But it had suddenly failed. Diagnostics revealed nothing. Nobody could get it to start. Theo. Marshall Greystone, a tall man with slick silver hair and a voice that commanded every room, stood with arms crossed, scanning the circle of staff with clear disappointment. Then he glanced at the janitor, Henry Whitaker, who stood in the corner quietly mopping the floor. Henry looked down, trying to avoid attention, but that only triggered something in the CEO. With a smug smile, Marshall turned to the room. "Maybe we should ask Henry's daughter," he said, pointing to a teenage girl standing near the exit, holding a worn backpack. Her name was Whitaker. She had come to visit her father after school, her bag stuffed with textbooks, engine diagrams, and a worn-out notebook held together with tape. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Marshall chuckled. "Go on, kid. If you can fix it, I might just fund your college." Everyone laughed. But Era did not laugh. She looked at her father. Henry tried to shake his head slightly, but she stepped forward. Her eyes were calm, but her voice shook slightly as she asked, "Can I touch it?" "Go ahead," Marshall smirked. "Be my guest." Phones were out. Some of the engineers began recording, expecting a moment of embarrassment they could share over drinks later. But Asura stepped closer to the engine. Something strange happened. Her hands stopped trembling. She dropped her backpack to the floor with a soft thud. Then she opened it and pulled out her notebook. She flipped to a page filled with complex diagrams and notes that made even a few of the engineers blink in confusion. "Where did she get that?" One whispered. "That is the same design we developed 6 months ago." Another murmured. She studied the engine for a full minute. Then she got to work. Her fingers moved like they had done this 100 times before. Loosened a casing, removed a panel, checked a tiny overlooked capacitor, buried deep in the control housing, and replaced it with a component from her own bag. "She carries components," someone muttered. "That is not just some janitor's daughter," another added, eyes narrowing. Era stepped back. "Try it now," she said quietly. The lead technician, still half smirking, pressed the ignition button. The engine roared to life perfectly, smoothly, flawlessly. The room fell silent. Marshall's face turned pale, but no one noticed hands. Shaking again, this time from something deeper than nerves. The secret she had buried was rising fast, and there would be no way to hide it much longer. Silence collapsed over the room like a wave. The engine's hum echoed through the cold steel walls, and no one dared to speak. For a full 10 seconds, the sound of Stratton Dynamics' most advanced power unit running flawlessly. After weeks of failure filled the space with disbelief, Era stepped back, wiping grease from her fingers with the sleeve of her hoodie. Her hands were still shaking, but not from nerves. She had just opened the door to something she had tried her whole life to keep hidden. CEO Marshall Greystone stared at the engine, his jaw clenched so tight that his temples pulsed. He did not look at, not yet. He was trying to process what just happened. The girl he had mocked had just solved what his best engineers could not, and she had done it in under 2 minutes. A slow clap started in the back from a young technician who had tears in his eyes. Then another followed, but it was not applause of celebration. It was awe, confusion, and fear all tangled together. Marshall raised a hand, stopping the clapping. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice more cautious now. Era did not answer. Immediately, she looked at her father, Henry, who stood frozen, mop still in hand, eyes wide with fear and something else, pain. She looked back at the CEO. "I am just someone who loves engines," she said. A few engineers stepped forward, eager to speak. One of them, a woman named Donna, asked, "That design in your notebook, how did you get that?" "That was a confidential model." Era hesitated. Her voice dropped. "I drew it." Laughter broke out again, this time nervous, uneven, almost desperate. "You expect us to believe that you reverse-engineered a prototype that cost $4 million to develop?" Another man asked. "I did not reverse-engineer it," Arid, opening her notebook again and showing another page. "I designed it. This one is better." Marshall's face turned red. He snatched the notebook and flipped through the pages. Equations, electrical schematics, fluid dynamics models, pages and pages of intricate original engineering work, annotated in blue ink with dates going back 3 years. "You designed this engine when you were 13, he asked, his voice low. "I never said I designed that engine, Arcted. I said I designed mine. Yours copied it." A loud gasp rippled through the room. Henry stepped forward, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "We should go," he whispered. "No," Marshall said sharply. "You are not leaving." Era looked him in the eye. "Are you detaining us?" Marshall stepped back, realizing the implication. His ego battled with his instincts. "Of course not, but we need to talk." Henry's voice trembled. "No, you need to listen." Marshall froze. "Years ago," Henry began, "there was a woman who worked here, a genius. She was my wife, Era's mother. Her name was Marin Whitaker." Marshall's eyes widened. "She designed the first version of this engine, long before your team took credit for it," Henry said. "And when she found out they were stealing her work, she tried to expose them. The next week, she disappeared in a lab accident. But I never believed that story. I took the only thing left of her, our daughter, and ran." The engine's hum continued, but everything else in the room was dead. Silent. A pin could have dropped in that room and echoed like thunder. Every breath hung heavy in the air, every heartbeat deafening. Ilara stood beside her father, her hands balled lead into fists. Her voice had not trembled. Her eyes had not flinched. But inside her chest a storm raged, a mix of anger, fear, and long-buried sorrow that had finally cracked through the surface. Marshal Greystone stared as if he had seen a ghost. The name Marin Whitaker had not passed through anyone's lips in nearly 15 years. Not because she was forgotten, but because everyone had been told to forget. The official story was sealed. The files were classified. The accident had been written off. The body never recovered. But what haunted Marshall more than anything was not just that mother had once worked at Stratton Dynamics. It was that she had been better than everyone else there. Smarter, faster, dangerous. Donna, the engineer, stepped closer to Era and spoke quietly. You are her daughter? Era nodded once. Another voice whispered from the back. I remember her. She taught one of my first training seminars. She could design propulsion systems in her head like she was playing music. Marshall's grip on the notebook tightened. His voice returned, edged with disbelief in something more bitter. Why come back now? Why expose this here? Era stepped forward. I never planned. I did not even want to be here. You made it a joke. You asked me to fix something your engineers could not. Oh, I did. But now that I am standing here, I will not walk away from the truth again. Henry placed his hand on her shoulder, but gently moved it aside. You see, I used to think silence protected people, she continued. But silence is what let her die. And if there is even one person in this room who remembers her, who wondered what really happened, then I need them to hear it. A senior engineer named Leonard, with gray in his beard and guilt in his eyes, slowly raised his hand. I was here when it happened. I saw the files get pulled. Saw her research rerouted. I never spoke up. And you were not the only one. Henry said sharply. I cleaned the labs. I heard the whispers. I saw the locked rooms, the engineers who panicked when her name was mentioned. They buried her. But they did not bury her mind. They did not bury her blood. They did not bury this. He motioned toward Marshall's expression twisted as the walls around him began to crack. Not the physical ones, but the illusion of control he had spent years constructing. Do you think this changes anything? He snapped. Do you think a name and a few blueprints make you someone important? Era smiled. But it was not the smile of a child seeking approval. It was the calm smile of someone who knew they had already won. You know what makes someone important, she said. The truth. And right now everyone in this room knows it, even you. The silence that followed was different this time. Not stunned. Not awkward. It was the silence of awakening. Suddenly, Dana took off her Stratton badge and dropped it onto the floor. Leonard followed, then another, and another. Marshall's eyes darted around, trying to find control again. This is not your company anymore, Henry said. It never really was. Marshall laughed bitterly, but it sounded hollow. Do you think they will believe you? Do you think any of this will stick? Era opened her phone and held up a video recording the entire moment from The moment Marshall had mocked her. Audio, video, confession. It already has, she whispered. The clip went viral. Before the sun had even risen the next morning. It started as a whisper on a local tech forum, then exploded across every platform like a tidal wave tearing through steel. Era's voice, calm and steady, resonated with millions. Her face, a perfect storm of pain and power, appeared on screens in homes, cafes, offices, and universities. People replayed the moment. She said the truth mattered. They replayed the moment Marshall Greystone was exposed. They replayed the silence that followed, and they listened. By noon, Stratton Dynamics was trending in every state. Not for a new defense contract, not for a rocket launch, but for a cover-up. The world suddenly wanted to know who Maren Whitaker was, and why no one had heard her name until a digital army dug through archives, uncovering old patent filings, with her initials, half-redacted memos, and suspicious project closures. And right in the middle of it all, no longer just a girl with a violin, no longer just a shadow, she had become the storm. Inside the headquarters, chaos churned like a machine overheating. Marshall had barricaded himself in his top floor office, flanked by lawyers and PR advisors. They urged him to issue a statement. They begged him to acknowledge the truth or at least pretend to care. But Marshall refused. Pride was a poison, and he had drunk deeply. In the lobby, the employees gathered around monitors. Some watched with disbelief, others with hope, a few with shame. Leonard stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, clutching his badge. Now useless. Dana typed furiously on her laptop, uploading internal files to investigative journalists. Every piece of evidence was another crack in the empire. Henry and Era sat side by side in the old break room. Neither spoke at first, just the hum of a vending machine and the distant sound of news anchors discussing their lives as if it were a movie. I never thought it would actually come to this, Henry finally said. I did not think it would either, Arid. I just wanted to play the violin that day. But you know what I realized standing in that room? Henry looked at her. I was never just my mother's daughter. I was her voice. And someone had to speak for her. He nodded slowly, emotion rising in his throat. Suddenly, a knock echoed down the hallway. It was firm, sharp, almost ceremonial. A group of federal agents stepped into the main atrium, wearing navy jackets with gold lettering. They did not say a word to the staff. They went straight to the elevator. No one tried to stop them. The entire company watched in stunned silence as the doors closed behind them. Rising to the executive floor. 20 minutes later, Marshall Greystone was let out in handcuffs. The moment his face appeared on every screen across the building, a spontaneous cheer erupted. Some clapped, others cried, but most simply stood in awe. The man who ruled through silence had been silenced. Outside, cameras flashed as Marshall was placed into a black SUV. Journalists shouted questions, but Era did not speak to them. She stood on the front steps with Henry, watching the gates close behind the man who thought he owned everything. You should say something, Henry whispered. They are waiting. Era took a breath and stepped forward. My mother gave her life to Build something beautiful, she said. Others tried to bury it, but truth cannot stay buried forever. It rises, even if it takes years, even if it takes her daughter. And in that moment, it was not about revenge. It was about something far more powerful. Justice. Era stood outside the Stratton Dynamics, building as if the world itself had shifted beneath her feet. The sun glared overhead, casting long shadows across the courtyard where employees and reporters had gathered. But even in the chaos, there was a strange, almost sacred stillness around her. It was the kind of silence that followed storms. Not empty, but filled with awe. Yet, inside her, a different storm brewed. Limousine rolled up to the curb. Windows were tinted darker than obsidian, and the crowd instinctively parted. No one knew who was inside, but something about the vehicle demanded respect. The driver stepped out, tall and suited, then quickly opened the rear door. Out stepped a woman. She was tall, in a sleek emerald coat that shimmered in the light. Her hair was silver, but her posture was iron. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Era and softened. It was Olivia Whittaker, grandmother, Marin's mother, the matriarch who had spent years in silence, grieving the loss of a daughter and believing justice would never come. Era, she said, her voice trembling. Era turned. For a moment, the world fell away. They had never met before. Only letters, only distant memories shared by others. But in that instant, blood recognized blood. I kept everything, Olivia whispered, tears rising. Every article, every photograph, every note your mother wrote. I was waiting for this day, even if I never believed it would come. Era took her hand and felt decades of pain flow between their fingers like current. For the first time, she was not standing alone. She was standing with legacy. Behind them, a man stepped forward. He wore a crisp suit, though his demeanor was more humble than corporate. He introduced himself as Calvin Rohr, the acting head of the Department of Scientific Ethics, a new division created in the wake of the Stratton scandal. He offered a folder. What is this? She asked. Justice, he said. An opportunity. Inside was a letter, signed by multiple senators. It stated that a new initiative would be launched, the Whittaker Program, a federal project, to fund, support, and protect young inventors from marginalized communities. The opening of a national research center. The top name on the advisory board, Aller Whittaker. Tears filled her. Not because of the offer, but because of what it meant. Her mother's work would not vanish. It would not rot in the hands of thieves. It would rise. That night, Alara stood on a quiet stage inside a small community center, near the same hotel where it had all begun. Children sat with wide eyes as she lifted her violin. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell. Then came the first note. It was soft, fragile, but within seconds it grew, rich and soaring, filling every corner of the room. It was not just music. It was memory. It was truth. It was every step her mother had taken, every injustice, every victory, every tear. And when she finished, no one clapped. They simply sat in silence, breathless, transformed. Outside, a billboard lit up. Above the city skyline, it showed a single image, a mother and daughter, standing side by side.